It's your boy Vin in the house. I guess we're having another one of these stream thingamajiggies. We're having insomni stream, I think is what we've called it. So insomni stream is where basically I hang out, answer questions, that type of thing. Mostly about the Christian religion, I guess you could say. But I mean, it's an ask me anything, so you could pretty much ask me anything. So, I'm gonna hang out for a little bit, and if people have questions, then they can ask me some questions, and I'll answer it because something productive. I always want to find some way to be productive, so that I'm not wasting my time. We had a pretty cool stream today. It was about the Proto Men. Holy smokes, man! That band is pretty crazy, mega talented. It was an entire stream. It was an entire. They made an entire record about basically what do you call it? A video game. So it's like I pretty much discovered that it's based on Mega Man, um, the the video game. So they made an entire thing based on Mega Man. I thought that was pretty ridiculous, but they did such a good job on it. We listened to the entire thing. Um, Unbelievable, unbelievable. We've got a bunch of streams lined up, so that's going to be pretty fun. After this, after this little hangout, I'm going to go to the gym because it's pretty cool because it's kind of early in the morning for some people. So most times the gym is empty. So pretty much do what I want. Nobody talks with me. Nobody messes with me. You know when you're at the gym and you're trying to work out and like people just like insist on talking. It's kind of a little bit hectic. Kamikaze in the house. Hey, I hope you got your 1 hour of sleep, bro. I hope you got your 1 hour of sleep. The Mega Man stream was cool. Middle Earth in the house. Middle Earth, I'm pretty sure your guys' stream is coming up pretty quickly here. So that's going to be fun. Um, Definitely a unique band, man. That Proto Men group. They're pretty unique because it's one of those things where it's like really it's it if my audio is working good, then we're good to go. Last time I had some audio issues. Um, the 13th. Okay, so the 13th. So let me see. What day is today? What day is today? Today is the 11th. Okay, so in a day or two. Okay, perfect. Perfect, man. So that's what's up. We should have some good times. For sure, for sure. I got my hour. I'm at work right now, but I'm more like a zombie. You got to get some sleep, man. You know, my job is a little bit different. So I can get multiple hours of sleep, here and there whenever I need to. Yours is a little bit different, man. So you got to get your rest. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I'm one to talk. I'm having this stream at 4:17 a.m. where I am. So I really don't really have a lot of room to talk. So it is what it is. So anyway, it doesn't have to, I guess I'm gonna have to. Yeah, let me. Let's see. Sorry, I'll keep sorry over here. Chris Knight in the house. If you were to recommend a metal song to a fellow Christian who isn't into metal, what would it be? Hmm. Probably I would start them off with Judith from A Perfect Circle. I'd start them off with Judith from A Perfect Circle. Because while it may be risky, um, I think understanding Maynard's backstory and why he said what he said to his mother in the song, I think if you listen to it with ears of understanding, I think as a Christian you could say, okay, I see where that guy's coming from. Maybe these people are not all crazy, horrible, God-hating people, which of course, I mean, one on the line says F your God, but I think at some level I'm trying to hold folks to listen beneath the surface, right? And if you're not going to listen beneath the surface, then there's no reason to listen to metal as a Christian, because a lot of times what people are looking at as anger and rage is really just plain old pain and people trying to process pain and the confusion of life. So that's what I would recommend to first Christian song. If you were to recommend a metal song to a fellow Christian who isn't into metal, that's what it would be. The other reason is I just think sonically it's really pleasing to the ear. Maynard's voice is one of those things I would call universal. Like, he just appeals to so many different people because, his melodies are out of this world. And so I also think that song is extremely accessible as far as music goes. Like maybe Slipknot would be a little too brutal. Maybe Maiden would be a little bit too complex. I remember when we first started the channel, we did not rank the Painkiller song very highly because, it was just a kind of vocal style that we were not really prepared for. You know what I'm saying? Whereas I think Maynard's vocal style is kind of universal. So that's another reason I would recommend that song. So yeah, it would be Judith by A Perfect Circle. Good question. The God That Failed by Metallica. Yeah. Again, yeah, another one. I agree with that. Because again, if you take the time to learn the backstory of James and why he would say that and what was going on in that song, absolutely. For sure. What time is it over there? What's up, Jesse? It is 4:21 a.m. It is 4:21 a.m. And after I get done hanging out with you beautiful people, I'm going straight to the gym. So, yeah, I wanted to be productive today, so there we go. Great answer and awesome choice. Not Cradle of Filth or Behemoth then. Well, I have some friends who are like really deep into theology. The problem, especially with Behemoth, with my Christian friends, and this is going to sound horrible and people are going to say, oh, you're just being prideful, Vin, or whatever. I don't think that a lot of my Christian friends would have the theological sophistication to even know 50% of the references that Nergal makes in a lot of his songs. Because a lot of the songs that Nergal, where Nergal has biblical allusions, is to intertestamental literature, Enochian literature, things like that. And I don't think a lot of my Christian friends are even, especially the circles that we were around, would even be familiar with a lot of that stuff. So that's why I wouldn't recommend Nergal, not necessarily because of the offensive part of it, just because I don't believe that they would even know what the hell the brother was talking about the majority of the time. So I don't know how else to say it, but that's how I would say it. So no, I wouldn't recommend Cradle of Filth or Behemoth. Somebody into metal, like I'm gonna try to make it as accessible as possible, right? Like I'm trying to make it as, easy on the ears to listen to as possible so that people can get it and they can understand what, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, it would it would be Cradle of Filth. Have I ever met a Satanist? Paj Mahaj says, have you ever met a Satanist? I don't want to say that I have. I have met a couple Satanists. So when I was in New York City, And I first got into, so I was in the Bronx, New York. And so I discovered Korn at Woodstock, so I'm in high school. I discovered Korn at Woodstock. And so I became a metalhead. All my friends, all my previous friends basically abandoned me, which is okay. Like, yeah, I get it. Like, you're in the Bronx and then, I start dressing weird. I start painting my nails, all this stuff. My book bag has, none of the gang shit's on my book bag. It's all Marilyn Manson insignia and Korn and all the rest of it. So I understood why, all my friends just started, dropping off. And then I just started hating rap music. I had my fill of it. I think for me, it was like, why do I want to listen to rap music when I'm living this shit every day? I'm hearing about, dudes are rapping about shooting and all this. Like, this is shit I'm seeing every day. So it got to the point where rap wasn't about like, oh, it's reporting what's happening, because to me it was like, this is what's happening, like I'm living it. If I was in the suburbs and not living it, then I'd probably love rap music. But anyway, so long story short, I got into metal, all my friends left me, and then I got a new group of friends, right? And I basically started this, like, they used to call us a trench coat mafia, but I basically started the little metal whatever in the school. And we would go to 14th Street. Now, 14th Street is Greenwich Village, the village. Like, I used to walk by CBGB's every day. Like, and I didn't know, because I was not a metalhead. I had no history. I didn't understand the history of CBGB's. Like, I never stepped foot in the place, but there we were. Anyway, long story short, there was this group of people called the Vamps, and they would hang out by basically outside on 14th Street, and you get a lot of like disaffected teenagers, homeless teenagers hanging out on 14th Street anyway. And that's where we got invited to all the raves and all the rest of it, whatever was there. Anyway, there's this group of teenagers, young adults called the Vamps, and they would literally drink each other's blood, like crazy shit. Like stuff I won't repeat, like just insane, crazy stuff. We'd be going to the raves, it'd be coke here, ecstasy here, and then there's this just craziness happening. And so we had a couple people that claimed to be Satanists, right? But it was kind of like a cartoon version of Satanism. I don't want to say that was real Satanism. One of the girl I was with at the time had read the Satanic Bible from Anton LaVey. So she was calling herself a Satanist, but I feel like Satanism has a like continuum of seriousness. Like, I think there's some Satanists who are just trying to freak people out and do comic book shit and make Christians go, cringe. And then there's other people that have really adopted a sort of philosophy of Satanism that's non-theistic and very philosophical and very serious. And then you've got, which I found out. So that was my understanding of Satanism, was that it was a LaVeyan philosophy. I didn't know about theistic Satanism, where you actually had people that believed that there was a being called Satan or the devil or whatever that they worshipped and followed and all the rest of it, until we started doing Vatane reactions, and then people were like, yo, this dude legit believes in this stuff and all that. So yes, I have met self-proclaimed Satanists, and I guess, if you proclaim it, you are one. But I'm saying that with an asterisk, because I don't feel like they were serious Satanists, right? I just feel like they were just trying to make a, show us stuff. So there's that. Do you know the Hail Satan podcast? I don't know about the Hail Satan podcast. We actually did an entire review of the Hail Satan movie, where we actually had a Satanist. I don't think he has a problem. Blake from Nuclear Reactions is like a legit Satanist. And so Soria and I were watching the movie, and we would stop, and then we would get Blake on, and Blake would say he agrees with this, he didn't agree with that. It was a massively fascinating discussion. YouTube pulled it and then gave us a copyright strike. It was a strike, meaning 2 more of those and the channel is done, which I didn't really contest, because we played the entire thing front to back. It was like a 4-hour meeting. But it was a very, very fascinating movie. And again, they were not crazies. They were not insane. They were people that were using, legislation and things like that. They wanted a Baphomet statue in the middle of the town square, which, look, if you're going to have a Ten Commandments statue in the middle of the town square, there's no way as an American you could say that these people cannot have a Baphomet it's impossible to argue against constitutionally. So obviously, if you're an American, you have to support that. And I did. And for me, watching the show was insane, because you had this Christian guy that basically, these guys were getting death threats and all the rest of it. It's like, who's really working for Satan here? You know what I'm saying? Like, the Satanists are just exercising their constitutional right to religious freedom and free speech. And then here come the Christians threatening to kill them. You had one crazy dude. I mean, he's part of my family, I guess, because he's a Christian. He rammed his truck into the Baphomet statue. Just craziness. But anyway, it was a very, very fascinating podcast, for sure. Get beginners into Despel Omega. Faith alone or faith plus works? Woo. So what this person is asking is, how are we justified before God? Are we justified by faith alone, or are we justified by faith plus good works? So this was the entire, one of the major issues during the Protestant Reformation, right? I'm a faith alone guy, but of course, with a small caveat that I believe, I'll say this, I'm a living faith alone guy. I'll say it that way. Because the Bible does talk about dead faith. Dead faith doesn't produce any works. And we're told in the scripture that if you have dead faith that doesn't produce good deeds, then that faith cannot save you. We're told that we're saved in a living hope. I think Peter uses the term living hope. And that's where I fall. I believe that faith is the only thing that saves me. I cannot do anything to earn my status with God or maintain my status with God. But if I'm truly connected to God, then I am necessarily going to manifest good deeds that are noticeable in the real world. If I'm a selfish person, I'm going to be progressively less selfish if you watch me over time. If I am a violent person, which I am, I'm going to be progressively less violent over time. Not because I'm trying to earn my spot or keep my spot, but because if you are around Jesus and the Spirit of Jesus, it is impossible to remain the same kind of person. If you claim that you're around you, see, the other issue with this question that I have, Click, is that to me, people who say that you can be saved by a dead faith, that a faith that doesn't change you, to me, that is a denial of the Trinity. And so, if you look at the Trinity from an economic perspective, and what that means is you look at the Trinity in regard to how the three persons of the Trinity work to save us. You have the Father who chose us, you have the Son who died for us, and then you have the Holy Spirit who activates holiness in your life. And all three members of the Trinity save you. And if one of those members of the Trinity was not actively working on your behalf, you would not be saved. And so when people say, oh, I said a prayer, so now I'm saved, but my complete life isn't changed, well, now you're denying that the Holy Spirit works in that person's life. Because what in the world is the Holy Spirit doing in that guy's life if his life isn't changed at all? I think that that's a significant problem for people who make that statement. So this is one of the clearest passages that deal with this to me. It's Ezekiel 36. And God says, I will sprinkle clean water on you and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your impurities and all your idols. You go, okay, that's what Jesus did. Jesus is known as a high priest, and the priest would sprinkle water on you and then pronounce you to be clean or whatever. And that's what Jesus does with this work on the cross. And then it says, I will put a new heart and put a new spirit within you. Technically, that's talking about what's called regeneration. I will remove your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And watch this. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes and to carefully observe my ordinances. So what I will say is, if verse 27 is not happening in your life, then verse 25 did not happen in your life. You cannot say that verse 25 happened in your life, but you still have a stony heart, you still are hard-hearted, and you're not progressively becoming a better person. Notice, I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes and carefully observe my ordinances. Those are a package deal. And so what I would say is simply, what saves me? Only my faith. I'm not going to add any of my deeds on the scale. When I show up to Jesus and he says, why should I let you into heaven? The only thing I'm going to say is that you died on the cross for my sins. But then the question is going to be, how do we know that Vinny truly believed that? And then you're going to look at my life and you're going to say, okay, this dude was a violent dude, but he progressively became less and less violent. This dude is a self-centered dude, but he progressively became less and less self-centered. All of these are indications of a living faith. And so I believe that I am only saved by living faith. Nobody's saved by dead faith, and nobody is saved by good works. So that's how I would, and as Click says, fruit, right? It's fruit of the Spirit. And again, if you're connected to a living tree, you're going to bear fruit. If you're connected to a dead tree, then you won't bear any fruit. And so that's how I would, Ephesians 2:10, for sure. Do you think life is a test like a game? I don't like the term game, but I do. So Sori and I have been watching a lot of Neil deGrasse Tyson. We've been listening to a lot. I'm reading this book right now that's recommended by Elon Musk. And it's talking about the simulation hypothesis, right? And there's there's three ideas. One is that we don't live in a simulation at all. Two is that we're progressing toward one. And then three is kind of a subset of two, which is basically if we could ever evolve or progress to the point where a simulation is real, then we are almost certainly in one, because what are the odds that you live in the base reality if humans or other sentient beings have attained to that, right? Does that make any sense? So I'm reading that book right now. I do believe, and then of course, we're also been reading and studying a lot of Donald Hoffman, conscious agents theory, which is basically that matter is not fundamental, or that the universe did not begin with matter, but he believes that consciousness is fundamental. And by the way, to my knowledge, Mr. Hoffman is not a Christian. He believes that consciousness is fundamental, not matter, and that we booted up matter or the material world so that we could have we could interface with each other and have experiences with each other, etc. So I put all those together from a Christian worldview. I'd say, well, we're almost certainly in a simulation, because the Bible says that what is seen here on earth is simply a shadow or a type of the things in heaven. And then we're told that what is seen is temporary, what is unseen is eternal. And so from that vantage point, it's not very difficult for me as a Christian to say, well, of course, God booted up this universe, space, time, whatever you want to call it, as a simulation for us to interface with each other, relate to him, and expose in some sort of physicalized, tangible way the inner workings of our intentions and our hearts. And so I would not know how selfish I was, for example, unless I had a child. When you have a child that's completely dependent on you, your experience of being annoyed or upset, even of having to take time out of your agenda to take care of this little blob, right? That exposes a certain degree of selfishness that I have. Same thing with marriage. you don't know how self-centered you are until you get into other relationships, right? I don't know my propensity for violence until I see something happen to my child. So I last summer something happened with one of my kids, and so when I interfaced with the individuals who I thought, I mean, I was insane and inconsolable at that moment. You revert back to certain types of things and you go, oh, okay, that's still inside of you. So I don't think God is playing a game, but he is kind of setting this place up as a platform to say, this is the invisible side of you. This physical platform physicalizes the invisible parts of you. It also physicalizes good parts of you as well, right? So I love Soraya with all my heart, you know, the best that a person can love somebody. And now we've got two little kids running around that are the result of that genuine and real affection. And it's a mind-blowing thing to me that these two physical objects and persons would not be running around if this invisible aspect of what we call love did not meet between me and her, which then it's a mind-blowing idea that can happen. But boom, here we are. So from that vantage point, I do believe that we're in a simulation and that God is the ultimate scientist. I don't believe it's a game in the sense of, in the trivial sense of a game, but I do believe that it's that God constructed this particular simulation and iteration of the simulation to draw out from us so that we can have self-knowledge and divine knowledge, because that's what we're going to need for the real world when he discontinues this program. So and Sori is up. So like she wakes up and randomly looks for me, and I think she's gonna go back to bed at some point. Vin, have you seen Elon Musk's Vegas death loop? I think it's a prime example of how markets are horribly inefficient. No, but send me an email and I will check it out, Benji. There's no good reason to believe the Bible is true. Well, I don't know if that's a question, ZX, but okay. If you believe that, I mean, obviously I disagree with you, but, you know, do with that what you will. What was your COVID experience? Do you have any lingering side effects? I had one really bad day. I get really sick once a year, and rating it, you know, 1 to 10, it was kind of a 7. Keep in mind, I take probably, I don't know, 11 vitamins or supplements a day. And we are pretty good at going to the gym and working out. Although I'm not sure. I think we'd taken a break at that point. So I wasn't really affected that bad by COVID. I almost want to say that the other thing is we were vaccinated. So there was one day when we were vaxxed where it wasn't fun either. As if you put my lingering COVID symptoms on the screen instead of my yeah. So I don't think, you know, Zoe got hit. She was fatigued. She had a very bad sore throat, very bad headache, but the most lingering effect was she was fatigued. Dorian was also fatigued. Sailor was fatigued. Johan was around them, and he was completely fine, which doesn't surprise me. I would say that they were relatively mild. When I was a kid, chickenpox ran through our house as kids, and it had a more dramatic effect on my brother than COVID did. Again, the two adults were vaxxed. The kids were not vaxxed. So our COVID experience really wasn't that bad. I mean, the worst part of the COVID experience was I've got a dad who's in his 70s, and he and I really, I mean, I didn't grow up with him, and it's one of those things where when you get older, you gain perspective. So I wanted to. We were going to spend some time with him at Thanksgiving, and obviously that got put to a halt. So that was the emotional, psychological side of COVID was difficult in that regard. The other thing was we were going to have to the initial recommendation of the doctor was to completely isolate the person who had contracted COVID, and it was Zoe. And Zoe is, she's 14. Our family is extremely, extremely close, so to isolate her, it was just something. I'm glad we didn't do it. I mean, Sawyer came up with an idea. We bought basically some plastic, and we duct taped the plastic together. So we created sort of we called it the ICU. And then when Dorian came downstairs and saw it, he put his hand over his mouth, got really emotional because everybody's so close. And all the kids had a hard time with the ICU, much less banishing her for 10 days. I just think it would have been horrible for our family, for Zoe, if we would have done that. But I'm only speaking for our family. But I would, if I had to do it over again, I would have done the exact same thing. Everybody caught it. But I think the physical ramifications of that were a lot less stringent than the emotional, psychological ramifications of what would have happened if we would have done what the doctor recommended. I feel terrible saying that because I take COVID extremely seriously, but our family is relatively healthy, and so I've just got to tell you the truth. You asked me a question, I got to tell you the truth. The physical ramifications of COVID were nothing compared to the psychological ramifications of COVID that happened in our household. So that's as much as I can say. It's been a good 4 years, thank you. I lost sleep. I slept for 2 weeks straight, just didn't want to get off the sofa. Yeah, there's a lot of... I'm very surprised that you're up.
I'm sure I won't be for long.
Yeah. Can you explain to me your idea of the Ein Sof and how it relates to your ideas about Yahweh and Yeshua? Well, I start off with the premise that all truth is God's truth. And so Kabbalah is a form of Jewish mysticism that, that is a combination of experience, mathematics, and quite frankly, drug use. And so from that vantage point, obviously I do not hold to, the main tenets of Kabbalah. However, the Ein Sof, as far as being limitless light, and being God in his prime to a degree, obviously from a biblical worldview, that can easily be reconciled. And the deeper you go into Kabbalah, emanations, the Sephirot, etc., Dr. Michael Brown, who's a Messianic Jew, is extremely orthodox in my vantage. Touch point to talk about the Trinity to a degree. And so I don't think that there are ways to harmonize Kabbalistic religion with Christian principles, but I do think that you have certain overlaps. And a lot of it has to do, for example, when a Muslim says inshallah, it means if God wills. I think that's beautiful, and we're told in James 4 to constantly say, when we make plans, inshallah, if God wills. That's beautiful. There are other aspects of Islam that I think are absolutely horrible, obviously. There's no atonement there, it's works righteousness, etc., etc. But from my vantage point, anything that's true or good or beautiful, I say that God has claim over it, and it's one of those things where you eat the meat and spit out the bones. So that's how I would characterize that, if that makes any sense. I would choose the risk the lives of others because my kid is special, is what you just said. Nope, that's not what I said. Because remember, Ben, my kids are homeschooled, right? So my kids are homeschooled. So so nobody else's life was at risk. It was our household, and what's interesting is the kids, one of their homeschool reports was they had to do COVID. They had to do reports on COVID and its effects. So our kids are actually probably more educated on the topic of COVID than probably you are, Ben, because their science and their literature and their speech class, they had to get speech, science, and literature credits based on that, and they had to do a presentation, and all of them had to do a different part of it. So all the kids understood what they were doing and the decisions that they were making. They were making very informed decisions. So no, nobody's life was put at risk. We locked down in our house, which is not difficult for us to do. And we all waited it out together, and that's the main reason that we did not travel to Florida, was because we didn't want to put other people at risk. So no, Ben, that's an assumption you made that was wrong, and I forgive you before you even apologize. No, that's not what happened. We had a person outside of our family who purposely exposed us to COVID, did not tell us until that person was symptomatic. And then as soon as the kids became symptomatic and we heard about it, we initiated a lockdown in our family. So you're wrong. We didn't even go to the gym during that entire period. So you're just wrong. And that's okay, because we're still boys.
And
that's
the
okay.
symptoms were so mild at the point when we found out that it wasn't even we went, but we weren't even convinced anybody had it yet.
Yeah. It wasn't until this person informed us that they had exposed themselves to a COVID positive person, and you told that person, go to the doctor, because this person never goes to the doctor.
When they didn't fight me on it, I was like, oh, it's bad.
Yeah, that's when I said, okay, we got to load up. Everybody's got to go to the clinic, and it's a wrap. Hola, mi amigos. What's up, Perk? What's up, Perk? Quite frankly, looking for the good and light and the love is good is the only thing that you need to do. If God didn't have love, why should we worship him? Yeah. When you face death and nothing happens, would you regret your life being devoted to something that doesn't exist, or do you think it was worth it anyway, theoretically? If my walk with Jesus, there's never been a conscious moment in my life when I haven't been walking with Jesus. And if Jesus was a delusion, I would die with no regrets. That would be the greatest delusion ever. And if I was just going into unconsciousness or forever blackness, which the more it's interesting. I am more and more solidified in the afterlife and things like that because of the science that we've been looking at.
Yeah, it's true.
Because of the scientists that we've been looking at.
It's laughable sometimes.
Yeah, I know, we laugh sometimes. So I'm more, if I was an agnostic and I was exposed to the sort of scientists that we've been looking at and really deep diving and buying their books and listening to their books and listening to hours and hours of them talk and interact with peer-reviewed documents and mathematicians and things of that nature, the more I listen to those people, the less and less, and it's damn near impossible to me that this reality and this conscious plane is all that there is.
Yeah.
But let's say I ignored all that data and information, and let's say, hey man, you can definitively prove there is no God. The Jesus thing was all bunk. That delusion or imaginary friend or whatever has changed my life, has made me a better person, has compelled me to, and of course it's difficult, right? Because Jesus is a historical figure. You're not going to get any serious historian and at the majority level that's going to even question that Jesus existed, that he made messianic claims for himself. Bart Ehrman himself said that Jesus thought that he was a powerful angel, which does not necessarily contradict the Christian understanding of the Trinity if Bart Ehrman knew his Old Testament. And that he believed that he performed miracles and people around him believed that he performed miracles, is what Bart Ehrman said. But that he was crucified and then thrown into a mass grave. That's where Bart Ehrman and I disagree. So But if Bart Ehrman is right, and that's where the Jesus story ended, and I was just living in a delusion or whatever, it's changed me for the positive. And if this world is all that there is, then I've done a lot of good things because of Christianity. Mm-hmm. I've never done anything bad or harmful to other people because of Christianity.
Oh.
But I have not done harmful or bad things to people because of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And if there was anybody on the planet, including the beautiful woman sitting next to me, that would say, don't do this or that thing, I wouldn't listen to that. Only Jesus. When Jesus says, hey man, do this for me, he's the only one that's ever talked me off a ledge. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's the same. It's the same with you. So, no, theoretically, I wouldn't have. No, I wouldn't regret it at all. Theoretically speaking. Now, would I be disappointed? Absolutely, because I want to. I want to meet him in a deeper and more explicit way, for sure.
I think for me, I would say no. I wouldn't want, like, the religion aspect of it. That's the religion that I'd be like, oh, my word, for real? Like, I went to that Bible college. I participated. That to me would be really frustrating, to know that I endured all of that for something that wasn't even true. But if I had to endure all that, and in the midst of that I did get a depth with Jesus, then that to me makes it worth it. But not that I think that's the only way to get some depth with him, because I don't recommend it. Going to those places.
Benji says, I'd argue that you spreading Christianity on your channel is harmful, therefore you've done bad things in the name of Christianity. The problem is that I have never intentionally spread Christianity on my channel. When I have specific debates, and you guys hear me reference the Bible boogies, and all those are privatized. I don't put those out in the main channel. I make reference to them, and sometimes if people ask for them, I send them. But I was actually taking a break from being a Christianity spreader when we started the channel. That was my entire intention, and
we were tricked.
Unfortunately, that's one of the reasons that I know it's true.
But we had no idea that metal music had so much about God.
I had no idea. No idea whatsoever. Perkinaw says, Ehrman is the minority about the mass grave thing. I don't understand why Jesus being thrown into a mass grave would be any more embarrassing to the disciples than the rabbi being crucified. Yeah, especially with this is the king of the Jews and the crown of thorns and all the rest of it. Ehrman said that in a debate with Richard Carrier in his closing statements. And Ehrman said, I used to believe in the typical burial, Joseph of Arimathea narrative, because Joseph of Arimathea was a named person with names and locations. But he says now, and he didn't really give a specific reason why he believed in the mass grave thing. So, but it was just very fascinating to see. Do you think there will be a second coming? Yes, I do. I do believe that Jesus is going to come and close out world history. I do not believe that there's going to be a massive secret disappearance of people and then a 7-year period in which Nikolai Carpathia or the Antichrist or whoever rules the world and makes you get a tattoo. I don't believe that. But I do believe that Jesus is physically coming personally to the earth to not necessarily close out world history. I think it is to undo the simulation, as it were, and bring us into the real world, into the next phase of the amazing universe that he's created for us to rule. No Halo 7 says, can you elaborate a bit further on not realizing God was such a hot topic in metal music? What did you mean by that?
What? Oh, because in the music, they talk about God. I mean, it doesn't matter. Almost every single song, even if you don't want to really be talking about it, forces you to talk to it because of the lyrical content. It's just unbelievable. And you think that the only, before even knowing anything about, like, what we were going to listen to on our channel. I had an assumption about that type of music, and it was always like, this is going to be devil music, it's going to be so bad. And then there'll be songs where it's even talking, positively about God, or just a genuine question about God, not even necessarily like some scary like like what they all made it all sound like it was. So
well, and then obviously there's what we saw today with Proto Men, where there were
it's
obvious
on purpose,
messianic allusions, of a father sending his son to die as a savior and all the rest of it that were clearly,
All right, I got to get up in a couple of hours, so.
It's mentioned in the Bible that God does never change, but at the same time, it feels he behaves very differently in different stories. How do we reconcile with that as believers? Well, I think that what we have to think about is there's a difference between our assumptions of God and his personality and him actually changing. So one misconception people have is the Old Testament God versus the New Testament God. People go, oh, the Old Testament God was mean, the New Testament God is nice. When Jesus talks about the Father in the New Testament, he's talking about the Old Testament God. Jesus was a Second Temple Jew, and they worshiped the Old Testament God. So when Jesus was walking around talking about the Father this, the Father that, yada yada yada, he was talking about the Old Testament God. The command to love your neighbor is not something that Jesus invented in the Sermon on the Mount. He was actually quoting Leviticus. So some of this has to do with our assumptions. We say, oh, Jesus is really, really nice in the New Testament, and God is pictured as nice. Well, Jesus is pictured as being covered in blood in Revelation 18. And if you look at the cross-reference, it's not his own blood, it's the blood of his enemies, because that's a clear allusion, I believe, to Isaiah 66, where he says, or 46 maybe, was like, where are you coming from with your robe stained in blood? And he basically said, I went out there and I killed all those people and there was nobody with me. I did it myself. So a lot of that has to do with assumptions about God. Jesus is wrathful in the New Testament, and God the Father is loving in the Old Testament. They do not change. Now, what's interesting is when you look at if you drill down to how God treats specific people, he never treats them exactly the same way. Because each person is an individual, and God loves to have individual relationships with his created beings, even his enemies, which is really, really fascinating. You look at the way that God talks to Cain, for example, where he says, hey man, what's wrong with your face? And if you've ever been a parent, that's one of the first things notice about your kid when they're off being bratty and crazy is their face. So he shows up to Cain and says, hey man, what's going on with your face? Chill out, bro. Like, chill out, or sin is crouching at your door. The door desires to have you, but you must master it. Then Cain goes and murders his brother, and then God shows up to Cain and says, "Hey, man, where's your brother?" And so clearly, he's giving Cain an opportunity to confess, and Cain obviously doesn't confess. He says, am I my brother's keeper? And then God says, man, you killed your brother, I gotta punish you. And then Cain says, well, whoever finds me will kill me. And then God says, no way, I'll be your personal bodyguard for the rest of your life. Nobody's gonna touch you. If they touch you, I'll avenge you sevenfold, which is where the term avenge sevenfold came from. It actually came from that. So this whole idea, like, that's a perfect example to me. That's one of my favorite stories, because the mark of Cain, the mark that God put on Cain, was not designed to condemn Cain. The mark of Cain was designed to protect Cain. But somehow that gets remixed into, oh, he put this mark on Cain to curse him and all the rest of it, when in reality, this is God being ridiculously gracious to Cain and saying, I'm not going to let anybody harm you even though you killed your brother. So So my point is, I think as believers, we say, okay, God's principles never change. He's always going to be holy. He's always going to be just. He's always going to be loving. He's always going to be compassionate. He's always going to be merciful. And if I see God completely wreck somebody, right, in one passage, and then I see God gracious with somebody, all I say to myself is, okay, the guy that got wrecked was at the end of his timeline, right? Because it says the Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and rich in love. It doesn't say that he's eternally, that he never gets angry. It says that he's slow to anger. So remember, when we're looking at these stories in the scripture, or if you're watching a movie, you're only seeing a snapshot of a person's life. You're only seeing the highlights or the lowlights of a person's life. So if you see God completely lighting somebody up in the scripture, it's because they've reached the end of their allotted patience. It doesn't mean that God is impatient in one passage and gracious in another passage. All you're doing is seeing somebody at a different spot in their timeline. That's all. So if you see God being gracious and compassionate to Cain, it doesn't mean that he wasn't gracious and compassionate to some Canaanite. He was. It's just that in that particular spot in the movie, they're at the end of their timeline. So I would say that. I would look for the principles of God's character that the scripture says about him. He's gracious, he's compassionate, he's slow to anger, he's rich in love, he loves justice, he will by no means leave the guilty unpunished, showing mercy to 10,000 generations, etc., etc., etc. So all these attributes of God, I expect to see in every page of the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, and those shouldn't change, and they never do. So that's how to answer that question. I am missing a lot of questions here because I don't have my my sidekick with me. So I'm very sorry, guys, if I missed your question. So he left Cain to live with the guilt. Death would have been an easy way out. I don't think so, because Cain functions very sociopathically. There is nothing in Cain's dialogue that communicates that he felt guilty at all. All he was worried about is his punishment being more than he can bear, because whoever finds me will kill me. He never makes any statement about feeling overwhelming guilt for what he's done. That's you projecting how you would feel, Kai, onto Cain. You would feel guilty if you murdered your brother in such a horrible fashion, because your heart is full of grace and you're a soft-hearted person, and I believe you've got brothers and that one of them's already gone on to the next world, right? And so you would feel terrible and you would feel overwhelming guilt, and you'd rather die than feel that guilt. But you can't project it onto Cain, brother. He didn't feel that at all. Cain went on, had kids, built a city, got to see his kids live to, whatever, and all that jazz. And there's no indication that he felt any guilt at all. So there's that. Do you contend that the Gospels were written by first-hand eyewitnesses? Well, yes and no. I mean, for example, if you look at the Gospel of Luke, Luke specifically said that he basically interviewed people to compile his gospel. So that couldn't, that's second, third hand, secondary, tertiary sources. What I contend is that the incidents that are recorded in the Gospels actually happened. That they're a biopic, that they're an oral history of a person who actually lived, and those events actually happened, for sure. Didn't Cain believe he was doing what God wanted him to do? No, there's nowhere in the scripture that says that. As a matter of fact, God warned him before he went out and did what he did. He says, be careful, sin is crouching at your door. It's desirous to have you, but you must master it. And so Cain's resentment was immediately called out by God as sin, and Cain did not master it. He killed his brother. And we know that Cain believed that he did the wrong thing, because when God said, where is your brother? He refused to answer the question. He never answers God where his brother is, and he never explicitly admits to killing his brother in the text. Not once. So no, I don't believe that Cain believed that he was doing God's will. Can you explain the difference between a nihilist and an atheist? Are they two different sides of the same shekel? Well, a nihilist, nihil means emptiness, and it's basically the idea that, look, you know, a bastardized form of Nietzsche, a person might say, is that, look, since there is no God, there's no ultimate purpose, there's no ultimate objective value, there's no ultimate objective morality. Our sun is going to go into heat death at some point and vaporize the planet, and it'll be like we were never here. As I say, the sky is empty. There's no God above us. There's no hell beneath us. There's no heaven to attain, etc., etc. There's no ultimate transcendent purpose to life. You are just a cosmic accident floating around here in the third rock from the sun, as it were. And because of that, life is completely meaningless and empty. So the death of a human being is equivalent to the breaking of a branch in a tree. That's nihilism. I do not believe that every atheist is a nihilist. As a matter of fact, I believe most atheists that I'm around are not nihilistic. Now, I would argue that is logically inconsistent. Or I could say that there are many atheists that say, yep, nihilism is just cold. If I just did cold, hard logic, I could end up there. But I don't want to believe that, and so I assign value to my friends and family. I assign value and purpose to my life, and that assignment of value is subjective, and I can live in that subjective world and find meaning and value and purpose there. So I don't think it follows as a necessity, as a realistic necessity, that every atheist has to be a nihilist or a nihilist. I don't think that necessarily follows. I do think if we were only idea machines and only function on logic, that would be just the cold math, right? But because, thank God, we're emotional beings, we don't just function on logic and reason, and for that I'm very, very grateful. Because if people only went with the logical ramifications of their worldview, we'd all be in a lot of trouble. So that's what I'd say the difference would be. Despite what some people think, there are actually scholars that do think the Gospels have apostolic origins. Richard Bauckham has a great book on this called Jesus and the Eyewitnesses. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm obviously one of those folks, for sure. Thank you for answering my questions. Yeah, I'm answering it to the best of my ability because I'm not an atheist, and I've never been an atheist. But that's the best that I can do. I actually don't see how God's value is any more objective than any other assigned value. Certainly someone can believe the Christian mythos and despise God. God's greatness is subjective. Well, if God is ultimate reality, then by definition, anything that he says or does cannot be subjective. So I don't know if you've thought that through completely, Benji. Matt P says, why not create a perfect system and sit back and enjoy the harmony? What is the point of the option for failure? Is God a gambler? Is there a chance to fail and hope imbued in us for a win? Well, Matt, I don't. Again, the simulation that we call Earth of the universe, it was built because we're supposed to interface with each other, have experiences, and attain certain forms of knowledge. And there are certain kinds of experiences that can only happen in adverse situations. So, for example, you cannot experience the thrill of victory unless somebody loses. You cannot experience the beauty of forgiveness unless there's some form of sin. You cannot experience so there are a whole host of experiences that we consider good that cannot happen unless you have adverse experiences. So there's nothing more beautiful, for example, than forgiveness. You cannot have unconditional love unless there are certain violations of a relationship. If everything is perfect, how can you experience unconditional love? That's why the scripture says that the angels long to look into the truths of the gospel, because angels do not experience unconditional love from God. And so that's one of the major things with me, especially being a father and having kids. If you ask me, if you could have perfect children, would you have them? I honestly would say no. Because when my kids screw up and we have it out or whatever, and I circle back, I take my drive in the car and I say, you know, I love you. And they say, even after X, Y, and Z? And I say, my life for your life, I love you. I wouldn't trade that moment for the world. I wouldn't. I would not have perfect kids if I could. Because being able to divest yourself of that selfishness. Oh, I'm only going to love you if you're perfect. Being able to truly love somebody that deeply and say, I love you in spite of your perfections, and I love you knowing that you're going to screw up again. I know that right now you are truly, truly sorry. I get it. And you're just telling me you're never going to do it again, but I have the experience. I know that Dorian's going to screw up again. And yeah, I'm going to call him out on it. We're going to have it out. But I love being able to affirm unconditional love to my kids. I love that. In relationships, there are certain forms of relational intimacies that are much better when you're making up, right? Than when everything's just going perfect. So the best music that I've ever heard comes from pain and adverse situations. Got to Life is my favorite song, and if Jonathan Davis was living a perfect life, we would have never gotten the beauty of that song. So there's certain beauties, there's certain joys, there's certain versions of love that are impossible in a perfect system. And so if God is love, I've said this is my running theory. I've got this friend and I bounce off heretical ideas to him. And one of my heretical ideas was one day the Trinity was hanging around and God said, Jesus, I love you so much that even if you were not perfect, I would still love you. Now, how in the world is that going to get pulled off? Well, very simple. He creates a bunch of people in the image of Jesus who have the capability of being imperfect. We are imperfect, and then he loves us in spite of that. And then at the end of this, God says, I told you I would. So that's how I'd answer that question. I would want a baby Elon Musk. God is not love. He committed genocide through the biblical flood. Well, Fenry, or Fenris, on what basis does God owe any of us life? In other words, Fenris, if I give you $100, right, and I say, big bro, take this $100 and spend it however you need it. However you want to spend it, just spend it doing good. And at some point, I'm going to collect the remainder of the balance, okay? And then Amy, so you spent $50 on it, right? And you've got $50 on your table. Then Amy shows up and takes the $50. And you call the police. Guess what's happening to Amy? She's going to have to give you back that money, and then she's going to go to prison for a little bit. Why? She is not the one that gave you the initial $100. But if I show up and I take the remaining $50, I've done you no wrong and I've committed no crime because the money was mine to begin with. My brother, the principle of life that you have, that I have in a Christian universe or in a biblical universe is because God gave you that principle of life. And he's under no obligation to maintain that principle of life. He is under no obligation to give you or I or my son or anybody that you love. He's under no obligation to continue to give that to you. So if he comes and collects, he has done you no wrong. But if somebody else who is not the principal and sustainer of your life comes and takes it, they are wrong. Because it's not theirs to take away, because they're not the one that gave it. So you're committing a category error if you try to say that God committed, quote, genocide with the flood. Because what God did with the flood was take back the principle of life that belongs to him and him alone, that he gave to us on loan. But if somebody else comes and does it, they're not the loaner. So they have no right to take it. So I think you've got to structure your argument in a way that accounts for that. If you don't, then there's an obvious weakness there, if that makes any sense. Maybe he loves to play angry chess. What do I know? Well, again, Fenry, even in a biblical world, parents are not the originator of the principle of life in their children. As a matter of fact, there's a story in Genesis where the woman goes to the man and says, "Give me children or I'll die." And the husband responds by saying, "You foolish woman. Am I in the place of God who has made you barren to this day?" Actually, parents, men and women, are looked upon as the means by which God implants the principle of life. But they are not the authors of the principle of life, even in the biblical world. So even parents are not allowed to summarily kill their children because we are entrusted with life. We are not the originators of life. God is the one that gives us life. God is God in our mother's womb, and that's why we shouldn't kill children. So there's no analogy between humans and God as far as the principle of life goes. It's sad music. I don't know if it's sad music. I mean, it's club music. You know what I'm saying? Club. Yeah, we're going to the club. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, God is the opener and the closer of the womb in a biblical world. So even parents are not in control of that from a biblical worldview. I don't think your logic follows. You can be discontent with the most ultimate reality. You can despise reality itself as a concept even. Oh, I agree. I agree. You can be. I don't disagree, Ben, that you can be. I mean, you are obviously at this point in your life, at this snapshot in your life, not content with the ultimate reality that is God. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I hope you repent, as in I hope you change your mind on that, because it's the best thing in the world, and it's the best thing out of this world. Yeah, man. R.I.P. Bob Saget. Really horrible. Really, really, really horrible. R.I.P. Bob Saget. I mean, I grew up with the homie. Full House was that was my first crush, was Stephanie Tanner, because she was a middle child. Shout out to Stephanie Tanner. And there was also America's Funniest Home Videos. I kind of had a little traumatic kind of PTSD moment when I realized that Bob Saget wasn't like the wholesome Danny that I watched in Full House, because I didn't have a dad growing up through no fault of his own, and Danny was kind of my stand-in dad for a while watching Full House. And so when I saw him on Comedy Central or something, he's making all these dirty jokes and saying all types of, I was like, oh no, what's occurring? You know what I'm saying? But yeah, rest in peace to Bob Saget, man. That tough news. Yeah, his stand-up was crazy. His stand-up was absolutely crazy. I couldn't believe it. I was like, man. Horrible, horrible situations. Okay, guys, 5 minutes, guys. 5 minutes. But yeah, man, that was definitely a gut punch. I think Betty White died in yeah, Jodie Sweetin for sure. Yeah, Jodie Sweetin. That was Stephanie Tanner for sure. If God had any intelligence, he wouldn't put any life into crack babies who have a 0.09% chance of survival. Well, I'm not sure that crack babies have a 0.09% chance of survival. Amy, that's number one. I'm not certain that is true. And secondly, there are lots of children who are born in adverse circumstances that, if given the opportunity to live, have accomplished great things. Simone Biles, for example, her mother was on drugs while Simone was in the womb. It's an incredible story. They were telling her, get rid of the kid, yada, 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 give, whatever. She absolutely had a lot of adversity, and now she's on top of the world. And so, there's this Chinese proverb that's really interesting that I've heard twice this week, and it's a very interesting parable, and it basically goes that this Chinese dude, he was living in a farm, and his horse went missing, and the people in the farm said, "Oh, this is so horrible! I'm so sad that this happened to you." And he said, "Maybe." And then, so the party came back, and wouldn't you know it, 10 horses showed up with the horse that was missing. And so the people go, "Holy smokes! It was a good thing that your horse went missing, because now look, you've got nine extra horses." And the farmer goes, "Maybe." And then the farmer's son, who was helping to break in these horses, he falls and he compound fractures, bones sticking out of the kid's shin. And the people in the community go, "Oh my God, this is so terrible! Look at this injury that happened to your son. This is so horrible." And the farmer says, "Maybe." And then, once you know it, World War I breaks out, and so they're coming. They sweep up all the warring age males, and they go to sweep up his son. But his son's got this compound fracture, so they overpass him. And they show up to the farmer's house, and they go, "Oh my God, this is a great thing that your son had a broken leg, because now he's not going off to war." And the farmer says, "Maybe." And the point of the parable is that you're only seeing a snapshot in this person's life. It's not until you get more context and more information where you can look back, where you can know if something was good or bad or not. And so when human beings say things like, "Oh," and guys, just if you didn't know, Amy and I are like legit friends. We're going to be, the three of us are going to be hanging out in, I think, less than a week in Boston. So that's one of the reasons why we won't be doing any like, that's how much we love Amy. But when people say things like, if God had any intelligence, he wouldn't allow these crack babies to live. I think our Chinese friend would say, maybe. I think it's an extremely short-sighted thing to say. We don't know what God's plans are. We don't know how that child, in their brief life, how that child affected the ultimate panoply of the world. I mean, there's this concept called the butterfly effect, right? Where you get some butterfly in Indonesia, flaps his wings, and then because of that, the dust or the pollen gets moved half of an inch, and because of that, somebody sneezes, and because a person sneezed on another person, a fight breaks out. Because the fight breaks out in a different, there are different races or warring tribes, this gets blown up all over the media and then creates this giant world war. And so something as small as a butterfly can have massive reverberating effects all through the world. If that's true for a butterfly, how much more a child, even if their life was extremely brief? So I think it's extremely short-sighted and immature for us to say, because of what we see, and we can't make sense of what we see, and we can't see how that works in the the grand scheme of things, that means it was a waste. I think that if we pay attention to the lessons, and you don't have to be a Christian to know this, I think if we pay attention to the lessons that life teaches us, we would know that's probably not the wisest way to interface with that kind of information. Thank you very much for the super chat, Blackout. Holy smokes. Had to pull my YouTube channel due to targeted harassment. I used to participate in politics panel, and one of the channel haters accused me of being a fake Christian, manipulative. It's by right-wing agitators. What do I do? I think, Blackout, that you have got to, especially if you're a Christian, let me see. I had to pull my, I used to participate. Accusing me of being a fake Christian. Okay, so that means you're a genuine Christian. I think a couple things. One, YouTube is not for everybody. It can be an extremely toxic environment. If you look at every Tom McDonald review I've ever done, it doesn't matter what I say. Hey, he's a good businessman, yada, yada, yada. His fans go crazy. They get very, very upset, and they ventilate his, whatever, right? And if you don't have a certain type of personality, it can be very, very hard. So that's one thing. The second thing is, so that's something you should pray about and think about. The second thing is, your walk with God is ultimately between you and Him. And one of the things that I teach Soraya a lot is that you don't have to justify your Christianity to anybody, because that's a deeply personal walk with God. When you're a Christian, a lot of times people are going to try to use your Christianity to manipulate you into doing and being what you want them to be and do. It happens all the time with us. People want to review, yada, yada, yada. This is what we do for a living. This is how I put food in my kid's mouth. People, oh, you're a Christian, huh? And people write these big, long comments, and oh, if he was really a Christian, then he would do the song I wanted him to do, and he doesn't understand the message of Jesus. Like, I'm never going to allow myself to be manipulated by people who don't know me. The people that do know me are the people in my household and my close friend. I do have a couple close friends on this channel. I mean, I could name them on one hand, but they know me and they know the genuineness of my faith or not. And so if my wife were to say, Vincent, you're the fakest Christian on the planet, that would make me pause and go, right? But if somebody who doesn't know me on the internet, or somebody who only knows me from the internet, people on the internet are only getting a snapshot of who I am, right? Like, now granted, we post a lot, and when we post, it's very long, and so you do get a good kind of chunk. I mean, I've gotten horrible messages about people dying of COVID and things of that nature in the middle of reviews, and broke down in the middle of reviews, and we keep the tape rolling because, it's got to be real and it's got to be authentic. But your walk with God is your walk with God. I would never allow myself ever to be manipulated by people, because you have to understand, the minute you put Christian on there, there are a demographic of people that are going to try to use that to manipulate you into doing what you want them to do, believing what you want them to believe, especially when it comes to politics. So I think you got to understand, if you're going to go into politics on YouTube, you have to prepare to be verbally excoriated by these people. You have to be, because especially in a post-Trump environment, and I don't completely blame this on Trump at all, because our left-wing media for 4 years went on a complete ridiculous propaganda campaign for that. So I'm not putting all the blame on Trump by any means. But in a post-Trump environment, you're not allowed to be able to have a side and be a moderate. People will say that you're an extremist one way or the other. They'll try to call your Christianity into question. If you're more on the left side, the right wingers will say you're not really a Christian. I've had people tell me that. If you're on the left side, you're on the right side, the left wingers will say that you're not really compassionate, that you're not a Christian. It just goes on and on and on, ad nauseum, ad infinitum. You cannot allow yourself, the scripture calls it the fear of man. And we're told never to fear man. And we're commanded never to fear man. And if you fear God, you'll never fear man. But if you fear man, you'll fear everyone. And so I would commend that to you. I tried to confront the guy, but he was persistent. I agree, but as long as I'm here, people will work to make me miserable, and I'm mentally ill. So sadly, I'll take the L. Well, it's not taking the L. If you have enough self-awareness, like for example, bro, I didn't do any commentary almost for the entirety of 2021, and my political channel was really starting to take off. I had an interview with Jimmy Dore. A couple of, I hit, 25,000 views on one of my videos. It was really starting. It was starting to bring in some serious money too, which I just did that channel as a hobby, and it was really starting to bring in some money, and it was starting to get some views. And right at the peak of it, I just stopped. And it's because the Kyle Rittenhouse situation happened. There was a couple other situations. The Ahmaud Arbery situation happened. And I just understood that mental health-wise, it was not going to be good for me to report on those topics and talk about those topics. And so I let a whole bunch of very lucrative shows go by the wayside because I wasn't going to do it, because I had the self-awareness to know that if I was to dig in and do all this research on all those situations, it was not going to be good for my mental health. And so I purposely didn't report on it. And I had people emailing me saying, yo, what about this? What about this? Hey, you're going to talk about it? It was really, catching a buzz. And anybody that does YouTube will tell you, when you have a wave, man, ride that shit. But it was just really, the Lord was like, hey, this is unwise, man. It's unwise for you to do this. You got a family, you got a life outside of this virtual world, and they're gonna deal with the fallout of you, trying to be a YouTube whatever. And so I didn't touch it. I didn't touch a lot of those things, and I'm happier for it. I'm glad. I'm glad I didn't touch a lot of this stuff, because it's your mental health is very important. So I don't think you took an L at all. I think it was a good thing that you did. What I never understood is they stuck Christianity with all liberating faith. Jesus came to liberate. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I completely agree. And again, a lot of it has to do, like we talked about earlier, is how do you define freedom? That's a very interesting question. Did you hear the cool Christmas song from Wolves at the Gate, Lowborn? If not, you really will be surprised with the cool text. It's interesting. I actually saw Wolves at the Gate live with Behemoth. I'm pretty sure they were with Behemoth. And they were a pretty decent band. Something kind of similar happened to me, the attack of a hater, and only because of Vin, that guy is safe from my vengeance. Amy is her own woman. I was a consultant, and I gave her some advice, and she's a wise woman. She made the right call from my view. So I would say that because of Amy, she did her thing. Poxitali Phil in the house. What's up, Poxitali Phil? Danny Trujillo in the house. Yeah, man, I gave the 5-minute warning about 5 minutes ago, I think. Yeah, Blackout. So I don't think you took an L. I would just say, just pray on it and work on your own walk with the Lord, and He'll tell you. A lot of this stuff is not worth it. I've got friends, Amy talked about it, but I've been in other situations too with other friends who are doing social media stuff, and it's just brutal, absolutely brutal, what's being said to these folks, and even from their own community. I'm being intentionally vague here because I haven't consulted her about talking about it live, but Even from their own community, people will just completely excoriate you. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how ugly people can be. And it put one of my friends in the hospital, literally hospitalized her. So it can be very, very, very dangerous. It can be very dangerous. And the more well-intentioned you are, and the more genuinely graced and good you are, the more it hurts. And I think because I'm not a very good person, but God is being extremely gracious to me, I can kind of survive those slings and arrows, right? Sorry, at the beginning, there was a particular situation that really hurt her at the beginning. But again, Sori is just a genuinely good, soft-hearted person. I am a horrible work in progress. And so if you're a person like me, it doesn't affect you as much. But the kinder and soft-hearted, the more grace you have in your heart, the harder it is to deal with those types of situations. For sure. Vin, have you ever seen Frank Turek, CRT versus Christianity? If only evangelicals would come together this fast and quick to combat hunger. Yeah, I haven't seen Frank Turek's take on CRT and Christianity for the same reason that I just explained. I stay away from those folks and those people for mental health issues. But I agree, if we could come against hunger with the same sort of vitriol that folks are coming against CRT, then that would be great, because we'd be able to actually save people's lives. Which, imagine that, pro-life people saving people's lives. That would be awesome. Funny enough, I put my opinion out there and most people think I'm joking, so I never get attacked. I don't get it. Well, you do get attacked a lot, Ben. But you're like me. You, Ben, like me, are not a very good person. So it doesn't affect you. You're a softer-hearted person than I am. I know that for a fact, because there's not a week that goes by that Ben doesn't send me an email. And in practically every email that Ben sends me, he is advocating for the little guy. I'm going to respect Ben and not get into the details, but in practically every email that Ben sends me, he's advocating for the little guy. And that's one of the reasons I love him, and that's one of the reasons why he has a very long rope with me, because I understand the persona that he puts out in this chat is not the Ben that I know personally. There's a lot of times when I read an email from Ben and it'll just take your breath away, because he's so good at framing these issues in a way that makes it so clear how much work how much work is necessary for us to get to a just society. I'll say it that way. Ben's really good at that. And I wish he would actually have a channel himself, or even a podcast. I mean, I'd send you the equipment, Ben, for goodness sake. I wish he would do that, because he's one of the greatest. One of the greatest, in my opinion. Objective for those with hearing loss, Ben. We're actually all going to see Evanescence. Me, Sori, and Amy. So I've seen Evanescence live. We had media passes, so we were about 3 feet away from them. And she's amazing live. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. She's absolutely amazing live. Brilliant woman. All right, guys, 5 minutes. Would it be a stretch to say the horror of Babylon is a literal relationship between religion and the government? Yeah, I agree. The woman riding the beast. Yeah. I think if you look at Christianity in America particularly, we kind of start losing our way. I mean, not just America, but just in general, when we were down in the catacombs and running for our lives and getting chopped up and fed to the lions, we were a lot more closer to Christ as far as how we interacted and interfaced with the world than when we got political power. I don't think it's always going to be that way. I think that the church is not mature enough yet as a body. I feel like the church is kind of like a teenager at this point. And if you give a teenager the wheels to the car, to the Ferrari, they're more liable to run that thing into the broadside of storefront than they are to handle that thing with the power and respect the power properly and use it for good. And so collectively, I think the church is a teenager, and we're not yet at the point where we are mature enough yet to be able to handle government power. I don't want to completely disrespect the church in America, because the church in America is extremely gratuitous with its funds as far as charity all over the world. But obviously there are glaring weaknesses, and our ability to be manipulated by government, particularly, I think the last 4 years has demonstrated that, right? Whatever you want to say about Trump and things of that nature, and anybody that knows me knows I have a pretty nuanced view on Trump. 10 years ago, no Christian would have ever backed up Trump, right? I think that's pretty clear. If Trump would have came on TV and says, I have no sins that need to be forgiven, which he said, literally said, all strong Christian leaders would have denounced that and all the rest of it. But because Trump gave us an avenue into political power, those things got compromised. And so I think anybody outside of American evangelicalism could say, yo, you got some ice cream on your face here, guys. What's going on? So I think that that's a clear example. Again, I have a very nuanced view on Trump. I don't believe he's the Antichrist and all the rest of it. I'm just saying that the compromises that were made to accommodate Trump because of his access to power, it's kind of like an Antonio Brown, Tom Brady type situation where you have the paragon of virtue, Tom Brady, who kind of compromised some of his principles in order to play with a guy who could get him a Super Bowl trophy. It's kind of, and I love Tom Brady, but that's how it looks like to me. I'm not from Canada. What even is this time, bro? It is 5:45 in the morning. If Jesus intends to disciple every nation on earth, teaching them to observe all things he commanded, to be with us to the end, then we're still in the early stages of the church. James Jordan. Yeah. I agree. James Jordan. That's Doug Wilson guy, right? Is that James? He's. I don't understand why he's not bigger, Perk. Why he's not huge. James Jordan's unbelievable. He's got a twisted positive twist. He's just got a very twisted way of looking at things that are like, oh yeah, he's unbelievable. I just joined, so I'm sorry off topic, but I've always wondered, do you guys hate sometimes some Christians because of your content with regards to music? I wouldn't say it's hate, Sasha. I've gotten it's funny because me, Sorry, and a pretty big Christian guy who's in a metal band and his daughter, we were all hanging out one day. And he asked me that question because he says, that happens to me all the time. And he's like, nah, I just delete those emails, man. Screw those people. And so he's like, yeah, screw those people. I can't stand those people. And I was like, well, I said, if it's from a family member, Christians are my family. If a family member takes the time to send me an email and they're saying I'm doing something wrong, usually it's because, I have a potty mouth or whatever. Biblically speaking, you cannot say that that's hate. They're hating on you. Because biblically, Here's a perfect example. So I talked about earlier. We had a family member. We had a person in our lives that. So I'm supposed to go have this Thanksgiving with my dad, who I've been estranged from pretty much my entire life, and my kids have never met their grandparents because of this whole beef, and I've grown, and so I'm like, you know what, we're gonna take the whole family, we're gonna spend Thanksgiving. And this person knew that that's where we were going, and my dad's in his 70s. This person knew that that was our intention. She goes and exposes herself to COVID for an extended period of time, doesn't tell us, so now my kids are over there. This is my ex. The only way I can tell this story is for it to work. My kids are over there. She exposes the kids to COVID for 2.5 days or whatever that she has them. And she does not tell us until she's gravely symptomatic. Long story short, the entire house gets COVID, and I've got to cancel. I call my dad, and I'm crying, to my dad and say, Dad, I can't go, blah, blah, blah. And he prays, talks me off the ledge, whatever. But we had a live stream to do, and I had just gotten the results back, and it was just like, that was it. It's not going. And I went completely off for like 10, 15 minutes. I just like, and somebody, actually one of my friends I don't think he's here because he probably went to bed like a normal person. One of my friends said something about COVID that was not accurate, and I blitzed him too, and I just went crazy. A Christian message in the comment section, he said, stop telling people that you're a Christian. Don't tell people that you're a Christian. You said all this crazy stuff about your ex-wife, yada, yada, yada. That's not how a Christian should function, yada, yada, yada. And there is an atheist guy who was extremely offended that this person would ever say something like that to me, considering the circumstance. So this guy went to bat for me. And I said, biblically speaking, he's supposed to check you on that. And I'm a public figure, and I said it publicly. So he should have checked me publicly. Like, that's the rule. Like, that's biblically, that's how it's supposed to go. And so you can't say that those people are hating on you. Now, what I said to the guy was, well, no, I'm not going to tell people I'm not a Christian. I will say that I was wrong. So I actually, the next live stream, the guy that I went off on was actually, gracefully still in the chat, and he didn't leave and say, well, fuck that guy. He stayed in the chat. He stayed on the channel and all that, and he still remained my friend to this day. And I stopped what I was doing when I saw him, and the Lord was like, you got to make that right, because I was right as far as the data goes, but the way that I did it was completely wrong. It was completely un-Christ-like, and I was pretty much ventilating my pain and frustration about this issue, which goes back literally decades, right? Because this issue is between me and my dad, and now I'm going to visit him, and I can't visit him, and I'm worried, like, maybe I'll never see my dad, and maybe my kids will never meet their granddad. He's in his 70s, yada, yada, yada. And then this person, I spent a decade and a half working with this person, and they completely ruined everything, and then they left us, and all this got ventilated on this guy, and the Lord was like, this guy had nothing to do with this or this issue, bro. You gotta fix that. So I stopped what I was doing. I stopped the stream, and I said, hey, man, I apologize. I shouldn't have done that. Please forgive me. And the Lord was gracious, and he forgave me. And so that guy who made that comment had a small hand in me apologizing to my friend and making it right. And so for me as a Christian, there are clear boundaries, like, love your neighbor, that type of thing. Love God, love your neighbor. And I was not loving my ex, and to this moment I still don't, in that situation. My heart hasn't changed in that regard yet. And I wasn't loving my friend, and my friend was completely well-intentioned and didn't mean any harm in it and didn't deserve that. So that guy who said, yo, bro, you're out of line here, he didn't do it in the best way possible. But let's say I always tell Dorian, I said, Dorian, anytime somebody rebukes you or checks you on something, they're almost never going to be 100% right. And what most of us want to do is we want to find the 2%, the 90% where they were wrong, instead of looking at the 10% where they were right. And I tell Dorian, I say, listen, bro, find the 10% where they were right and hang on to that. The 90%, let it go, because it doesn't matter anyway. But if they were right 10% of, if 10% of their correction was right, and you ignore that, then you're wrong. And so I say all the time, I believe in original sin. I believe we're all sinners. And so I would assume that there are going to be a lot of times where I have to apologize on this forum. So my point in saying that is, every single time a Christian emails me or sends me a message, or I see a Christian say, hey, I'm a Christian, you shouldn't do this, I do not take it as hating. I take it very, very seriously. What I will say is that very rarely have those corrections been something that I completely agree with. For example, when he said, stop telling people you're a Christian, I say, listen, I'm going to keep telling people I'm a Christian, especially now, because I don't want people to believe that being a Christian means you're perfect and then you never screw up. I want people to understand that Christians screw up royally. And I don't want people to think that you reach some level of perfection or whatever, and that you never fall down as a Christian, because I think that's a lie, and I think that bullshit is stuff that kills people. So I disagreed with him stridently there, but on the other sides of it, he had a point, and I was wrong, and I had to apologize for it. And like I said, I was God's been gracious with a lot of these people on the channel, and they've been patient with me, and they've forgiven me, and we're able to move on, and we're friends. And he texted me this week. So I don't think I've ever gotten any hate from Christians. I've gotten a lot of corrections from Christians, a lot of which I have disagreed with, but also I've had also moments where it's like, you know what, I was wrong there, I need to apologize. There you go. So that's that. All right, guys, I got one more question to answer, and then I got to get out of Dodge. So after I answer that question, then I will get out of Dodge. Yeah, and he admitted that he was wrong on the facts. Yeah, that's true. And he's here for me as a friend and all that. It was a good situation. Was your dad okay about the situation? I'm gonna be real with you. I never really called my dad back and told him I couldn't go. I was outside the hospital when I told him the situation. I was crying, whatever. And then after, he kept calling me. I just could not tell him, bro. I couldn't tell him, because I'm a father now, and maybe one day I'll explain to you guys what happened with my dad. But basically, long story short, we were taken from him. I love my mom to death, but she did him dirty. It was very hard. I've stared down killers. I've been in very bad situations and dealt with it head on, but that I couldn't do for some strange reason. And to be honest with you, I haven't spoken with him since, because I still can't even bring myself to talk to him. Like, that's how monumental that whole situation was for me. Because there's just so much history and hurt and pain and behind it, and crazy family secrets that you don't find out till later, and then you become a father yourself, and I just know what it would do to me if something like what happened to my dad happened to me. Like my dad, I didn't know this. I shot my dad a little quick video in another forum for Father's Day, and all these people were like, wow, this is a crazy answer to prayer, and blah, blah, blah. And one of them that just really, it was such a gut-wrenching thing. They were talking about how they were taking shifts, that my dad was on suicide watch when we were taken from him. And my dad never told us what happened, because he knew how much I idolized my mother. So it just, for me not to be able to come through for him, like, that was very difficult. So sorry basically had to have the conversation, and he basically was able to put two and two together. And so now I don't know. I might call him today. You know, if you're a praying person or vibes or whatever, I'll try to call him today. But it was just so hard for me not to be able to come through for my dad. Because of that whole situation. But, you know, God has a plan or whatever, so, you know, who knows? Inshallah, he's got a plan, but, yeah, so difficult. I really want to know your thoughts. Leviathan or Zather? I'd probably say Leviathan. I think we've done a Leviathan song. I don't think we've done a Zather song or anything like that. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure. One more question, guys. One more question. CD Latin said, religion is often used to justify laws that are harmful. That's my main problem with it. I agree with that. CD. But I also think that if you look at the Soviet Union, that non-religion or a-religion or anti-religion has also been used to pass laws that are also massively harmful. So, there's that. I personally find some strains of Messianic Judaism strange. Some are Baptists that keep their kosher, and others are selectively decide which parts of the Talmud are authoritative. I could not have said it better myself, bro. I could not have said it better myself. Especially when you got guys from Texas. I knew a dude from Texas, Perk, and I'm talking about this dude was like not a transplant, like Texas, cowboy hat, crazy accent, who was convinced that God's proper name was Yahuwah, and that anybody who said anything other than Yahuwah was a pagan and part of some horrible conspiracy cabal and all the rest of it, and only him and the other ones could keep the Feast of Tabernacles. It was just very strange stuff. Very strange stuff. That if the New Testament church would have tried to enact, we would not have made it out of the first century. So, yeah, for sure. Tourniquet, you get what you pray for. Best Christian song. That should be interesting. It should be very, very interesting. Let's see if I found a question here. I think we're all tapped out on questions. I think. Oh, Infernal Symphony has a question. Why does God allow evil and suffering, given that free will is not logically possible? The consensus of expert philosophers and scientists believe determinism is true. Will is determined or random, not free. I don't think that it's accurate to say that there's a consensus philosophical position on anything. I will tell you that I'm a compatibilist, and so the traditional understandings of free will, I do not hold to. So when people say free will, I believe in free will in a compatibilist sense. But when people say free will, the traditional understanding or the mainstream understanding of free will, I disagree with. So having said that, why does God allow suffering? And what I would say is that it's a species of the question that I answered probably an hour earlier, which is that there are certain aspects of God and God's nature and certain experiences that we will not have if we do not have adverse reactions. And one of the questions has to be, you have to ask yourself, what is ultimate good? And if you say ultimate good is the unbroken comfort of humankind, then a world in which there is suffering is irreconcilable with God, with a good God, if that's your definition of good. But if you define good as something else, then your understanding of evil and good changes. In other words, if you ask a gestating mother, if you ask a mother who is bearing a child, and you say, in 9 months, what is going to be the ultimate good? She's going to say, holding my baby. Well, every woman knows that there is a gauntlet of suffering that you're going to have to endure in order to get to that ultimate good. But they will say that ultimate good is worth it because they'll say that suffering is worth it because the ultimate good in that little context is holding the child. So again, if the mother says ultimate comfort is what's best, and a genie shows up and says, okay, great, I'll make your child disappear, the mother will say, no. I'll take the pain because the ultimate good here is the child. So the question is, from my vantage point, what is ultimate good in such a way as to reconcile that with the concept of a good God? And what I would say ultimate good is seeing God and knowing God. So seeing God and knowing God is the ultimate good, not my comfort. Well, if that's true, there are certain circumstances in my life that necessitate certain degrees of suffering. So, for example, I just talked about a situation in which I was separated from my father and I wasn't able to come through for him. It was a really horrible situation. And while it is true that it was a very painful, horrible situation, there were so many instances where God came through. For example, for my dad, for him to see that I was broken up and that I was hurt, that I couldn't see him. And then he was able to pray and calm me down. And that was a moment where my dad was able to father me in a way that he was never given the opportunity to my entire life. And one of the real cool aspects of fatherhood is that when your kid's crying, when your kid's hurt, when Orion's having a bad time, and he goes, I want Daddy. And I get to pick him up and I get to comfort him. There's nothing like it. My dad, that was taken from him. So I'm in the car, I'm a grown man, and I'm like losing my mind because this woman has once again destroyed my life, and I'm like so frustrated and angry. And he's able to calm me down and say, hey son, let's pray. And he's able to pray, and I'm calm and I'm good. That was a circumstance in which he was able to do something that was taken from him my entire life. So there are so many aspects of God and God's nature that I'm able to see and experience only through adverse reaction and pain. And one of my favorite passages in the Bible is Isaiah 53. And in Isaiah 53, it talks about the suffering that Jesus took on in order to redeem the world. And one of the things I love about that story is that what we're saying is that God himself, who, yes, wrote suffering into my story, wrote ultimate suffering into his own story, became one of us and says, I'm going to suffer along with you guys. And it says in that text, out of the anguish of his soul he shall see and be satisfied. And by his knowledge shall the righteous one, my servant, make many to be accounted righteousness, and he will bear their iniquities. Okay? So, just unbelievable passage. And there was one time I was in church and I was praying and I was having a very, very hard time with this person that thematically I've had a hard time with for the vast majority of my life. And I'm praying and praying and praying and praying and praying. And that passage popped up in my head. And God said to me, son, what's true for the head is true for the body. Namely, if it's true for Jesus, that out of the anguish of his soul he shall see and be satisfied, it'll also be true of you. When all of this is over, you're going to look back and say, it was worth it, I wouldn't change a thing. So when it says, out of the anguish of his soul he shall see and be satisfied, what it means is, in the suffering that Jesus is having on the cross, and he was in serious anguish deep into his soul, the text says, yeah, man, but one day you're going to turn back, Jesus, and say, this is all worth it. And of course, we see later on in the Bible where it says that Jesus, who endured the cross, despising the shame, because of the joy set before him. And then at the end of the book of Jude, which is the book right before Revelation, it says, to him who is able to keep you from falling and present you unstained before his glorious presence in great joy. And so Jesus is on the cross in a lot of anguish of soul, and then he kind of fast forwards to the last day when he is able to present billions of people before God as perfected human beings because of what he did on the cross. Billions of people who are madly in love with him and will do and go anywhere with him and for him, who are completely and totally devoted to him. He can present to God the Father as perfect, completed, truly free human beings. That joy was bought for him by that suffering, and Jesus would not look back and say, oh, I would change it if I could. And so that's why we suffer. There are aspects of God and God's nature that we would miss otherwise, and ultimate good is not human comfort, and ultimate good is knowing God and experiencing God. And there are aspects of God's nature that you cannot have without suffering. And so I would commend that to you. And like I said, there are parables all through nature and through our life that indicate this. I'm about to go to the gym. And, one of the root words of agonizomai is to suffer. That's all people do at the gym is suffer. That's why nobody goes there. But I believe that the suffering is necessary for a greater good, right? And so that's my best shot as to why people suffer. So there you go. All right. There you go, guys. Having said that, dear listener, I have to get out of here. Much love to all you beautiful people. I said 5 minutes, I think an hour ago. If I am up tomorrow, I will meet all you beautiful people at the same bat time in the same bat channel. What I will say, see, I don't think the gym is God, but I think you can meet God at the gym if you'll open your eyes to it. CD, I'm not certain that animals don't have souls. The scripture doesn't say that animals don't have souls, and I think there are multiple instances in scripture where you can actually make the argument that they do. And when God talks about the new world, animals are included. And one of the 10 million reasons Jesus came to die was so that animals wouldn't have to be sacrificed anymore. So I'm not certain that, I think you need to rethink that. I'm not certain that you're right that animals don't have souls. I don't believe that there is any purposeless suffering, including animals. Have a good day and good night, village, as my buddy Perkinos says. As Kai says, Perkinos, take care, buddy. Stay safe. Benji, stay safe. Infernal Symphony, stay safe. All you guys, stay safe. Love your neighbor. Take care of each other. Amy, where's my picture, by the way, Amy? Where's the finished product? And always remember, Francis of Assisi preached to the animals. That's correct. He did. Shout out to Poxitani. Shout out to XBM. Morphology. Shout out to him. And if I forgot you, Dramatic Designs. Oh, that's a cool name, Dramatic Designs. Middle Earth, shout out to him. Thank you for that prayer, buddy, and I'm sure God's going to answer your prayer, inshallah. Shout out to all you beautiful people. Good luck in 2022. I have to get out of here. Vin out.